that I want to continue without code here at first and go make sure that I've got my team Explorer, my TFS folder connected properly so that it doesn't try to send my project off to some big Bitbucket in GitHub or something for me. My Team Explorer looks like it's all happy. Everything's good. So I'm going to create a new project. Does everybody look okay? Yeah, connected. TFS isn't doing anything weird to you or anything. You got it, you got it. I want to create this new project. In our new project, we're going to have a form that displays a list of all of these audio CD inventory things. Get this out of our way here so I can look at it. All right, so I want to do a new project. And I want it to be a Windows Forms project. And I'm going to use the .NET framework. And we said this is lesson 14 already. We're so close. L13 audio inventory app. Our audio inventory app just keeps getting new lesson numbers. Make sure I've got all this in the right place and I'm going to create it. For this application, of course, we're going to pull in our class files that we've created in the past. So let's check in Teams and make sure I've got them posted out there somewhere. There's what we want. If you go to Teams and find our CIS150 team, go to the code channel, and then click on Files. The L11 Audio Store app application has the compilation class and our database class that we need. So I want both of those. I'm going to check them, and I'm going to download them. Just those two. In my downloads folder then, I have this new OneDrive file that was just created today. I'm going to extract my files from that, so I'm just going to say extract all because it's a zip file even though I only had those two little .cs files. OneDrive still created a zip file for me. I'm just going to leave those two files in my downloads folder. Just going to extract into that same OneDrive folder because I just need them there for a second. Now, last time when we did this, we just opened the file in Teams and we copied and pasted the code, right? I just wanted to show you a different way. And there are other ways also. If we were in a work type situation and we were going to be using this compilation CS file repeatedly, we would actually create a class library for it and generate what's called a DLL. And then we would be able to include that in all of our projects very easily. We'll show you how to do that in C#2. For now, though, we're just going to import the source files, and we can keep using those over and over in different projects too. So I have my source files here ready now. In my project on Visual Studio, I want to go to the Solution Explorer. And remember, I can just drag and drop these things. Let's try it. If I take my compilation.cs and just drop it on this project, showing up okay. I'm going to do the same thing with my database CS file. Just make sure I drop it on my project in Solution Explorer. Did it let you do it? Do you have your 2 CS files in this new project?
Mine doesn't let me do it.
It didn't let you do it? Are they unzipped?
Yeah.
Another thing to do, if it won't let you drag and drop, right click on your project and choose Add Existing Item, and then browse through your file system to your downloads folder and find those 2 CS files and add them that way. Either way is fine. Or you can copy and paste the code like we did last time too. That'll work. We just want to get them in there so we don't have to recreate them. Did it work?
Yes.
Got it? How is everybody doing in the back? Got it? Got it? Daniel? Got him? Got him? Ashley, everything good? Got him? Remember we saw that we have to fix our namespace name in all of our files to match. I found a thing. See if I can do it. Probably can't find it again. Yeah, if you right click on your project in Solution Explorer, that's where I have right clicked, and you go down to refactor, there's this option that says adjust namespaces. And that's going to tell me, oh, this CS file needs to fix its namespace name, and this CS file, I need to fix it. So I'll click next and let it do it. Or we can just click on each of them and copy and paste that namespace, that solution name. Did you see that cool thing? Now that is from like ReSharper. So we could have that missing, that refactor option. So if you don't have it, go to your program.cs, copy your namespace name, then go to your compilation.cs and paste that namespace name, and same thing with your database.
I was able to find that and they gave me the option. I'm just wondering if I have my files in the wrong spot because I'm looking at a couple other screens.
Let's see
Yours
what you got.
doesn't say solution items. Like underneath the Explorer,
Here, show us what
when
you
I
got.
drag and drop, it
Show me, show me. I bet you're not the only one. If they have something weird is going on, I'm sure you're not the only one that.
not sure that I can zoom in on this.
Yeah, drag them down and drop them on your project.
I can take these out of the solution.
Yeah,
item.
just drag them onto your.
Right here?
Nope, on your project name.
Right here.
The project name that's bold. There you go. Now drag that other one down there. Because you want them in that project. Now delete that folder thingy up there. Because we don't want that. So see how we've got to be so location aware in Solution Explorer. We have to be on our project because we want these files added to the project.
On the database .cs file, mine has using L13 audio store at the top. Do I need to get rid of that? Because it's causing an error.
You want to make it the same as the others.
I know, but it's not that. It's got a using statement for the L13.
Oh yeah, you can get rid of that using statement.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, you're fixed now? Did it let? Woohoo! All right, good one. Thank you so much for showing everybody that. Because it's just, we can just be off a hair and it can just mess you up. I know that. It's just, that's why programmers make the big bucks. So yeah, what Joe was talking about somewhere in our compilation or something, we had some sort of using statement. I don't have it now.
Using the database one.
The other one. Okay, so let's take a look at our database class. It was a while ago that we created this. And it's really awesome. Make sure everybody understands a little bit how it works. This is a static class, right? The only things we have in it are static. And this class only contains this one method called generate data. Generate data returns an array of compilation objects. That's what it is expecting to do. Now, in our generate data, we create an array, and then we added a couple albums to it. I counted these again, and I think I might have the off by one error here. 1, 2, 3 entries, not 2. So let's fix that. We actually have 3 there.
Yeah, I think if I remember, that was intentional. You were trying.
Yeah, and our try catch took care of it. So we didn't see any errors, that it wasn't exactly right. Okay, so we're creating this array with 3 albums in it, 3 of our compilation object types. And then our compilation class, if it's all closed up like this, remember you can do edit, outlining, toggle all outlining. And there is a keystroke for that if that's something that you do often. Now, when you toggle that, you should see all of our code for our compilation class that we've been using over and over and over. Review it. Remember, we still need to be practicing on creating these things, even though we're using this one so often that is already built for us. Now, in our compilation class, we have private data fields and public properties. We have some constructors, and we override our toString, and we have one static method where we calculate a value. So that method is not dependent upon our instance of our compilation. All right, so let's go to look at our form. In our form, whenever we double click on form1.cs in our Solution Explorer, it goes to our form and design mode. Hope you've noticed that. If it's missing, you can't find it, it's hidden, double click on form1.cs. Now, sometimes when you're working on a form, you can have a mistake, and we're going to look at how to correct that little problem. Before we do, though, I want you to see some code behind files that are associated with your Form 1. If you click the exposure triangle beside form1.cs, you'll see there's another CS file behind it, the designer.cs. I'm going to double click on it to open it up in edit mode. So this Form 1 file, Form 1 is actually split into 2 different class files. They're called partial classes. When the compiler runs, it's going to put them together all into one Form 1 class. This designer code is the code that's generated by Windows automatically behind the scenes for us. So if you look at this code, this is what runs when we create a new instance of a form. I'm going to expand this Windows Form Designer generated code, and you'll see that in this method, initialize components, we have code that's creating or updating our form. We could write that code ourselves. It doesn't have to be generated by Windows. We could take over if we wanted to, but we let this code get generated by Windows because it's kind of handy. So that's all our Form Designer file has in it right now, is just this little bit about Form 1. So let's go fix Form 1 a little bit, and then we're going to come back and look at this Form Designer code and see how it's been added to. So we want to go to form1.cs design. There's our pretty form. Let's fix it. The first thing I want to do is update my text property so that it doesn't say Form 1. that always gives the users that lazy feeling of, oh no, they don't care about me at all. So this is going to be audio inventory list. We're going to list everything. And I want to change my back color. So find a pretty color, whatever you like, whatever you feel like today. I'll do light salmon, and then I'm going to make my fore color be something that looks good with that. I don't know. Brown. And I want to update my font because, again, you guys are trying to see it on the screen. So I'm going to not make it just a sans serif. I think I'm going to go to that font dialog. Remember, if you click the 3 ellipses, you can go to the font dialog and you can change your font name. And I'm going to go up a little bit, like to 14 or so that you guys can see what's on my screen. Now, of course, as soon as I did that and upped my font so high, my form really increased in size. The form designer was like, oh, you're going to need more space if you're going to use a font that big. So I can just shrink it back down a little bit, get everything set the way I want. Now we know that that changed our back color property, and we've done that in our code. So now if we look at our form designer code, we should see the code that generated for us. Now we have a little bit more information. Here, some more properties set about our form. Now our text property is set to something different. I have my back color, my font, and my fore color all set to a little something different. So if I wanted to know how to set a font in code, I could find this font line of code right here in this forms generated, in this Windows generated code, and utilize that in my own code. Okay, does everybody see how that code is getting generated? Okay, let's go back to our form. And in our form, we're going to put a label up at the top. And I want my label to be something like, my text box will say, all inventory. And I'm going to make that font really big because I want this to be like a heading. So I'll make it, I don't know, like 26. And I could put it in the middle, but I'm going to make my list kind of over here on this one side. So now that's great. But what happens if you accidentally double click that label? I don't want code associated with it, right? But I accidentally double click it. Well, last week I said, just leave it there. Don't worry about it. Because I'll show you what happens if you delete it. I don't want this label 1_click. So I'm going to delete it. And as soon as I do that, and I go back to look at my form, now my form's all hosed up. I can't see it anymore. And it looks like I need to start over. I don't need to start over. What's happened is I have an event procedure here that has disappeared. Let's take a look at this real quick. We know in Windows Forms we're programming based on events. It's event procedures. Events drive us. We have an event like someone's birthday, and we wire that to a process like the birthday party process. So we have our event that's associated with code. The user clicks on a button, a piece of C# code executes. That event is what fires that code off. Now we know we have to have that event associated with that control. The code that gets generated is called a delegate. A delegate is a piece of code that's going to execute based on a certain condition. And we set up a delegate or wire the code we want to execute whenever somebody clicks on a button or whatever. That wiring happened automatically for us when we double clicked on that label. We can use these delegates for a lot of really cool things. I could have multiple functions, and then I could determine which function to use based on a delegate. Here's a fancy one. Here I have created a delegate called print. Whenever somebody uses the print, basically looks like a class, the print type here, then my function signature will determine which method gets run. It's pretty complicated, but here's what gets generated in our C# code behind the scenes in that Windows generated code. For that label that I double clicked on now, I have a delegate. And this one line of code down here is the delegate. So looking at that one line of code, notice it starts out with the this keyword, so it's talking about this active form. Then it gives itself an event handler class. Says, as an event handler, you know what I want to do. What I want to do is, based on somebody clicking this button, I want to run this event. And here's the event, but button 1 _ click. So this line of code is what associates our click event with somebody clicking the button. So I could put this code in if I wanted to, but we usually see it generated by Windows automatically. Now that I deleted that event procedure out of my code, I've got to delete that delegate. A couple of other things here in this little presentation before we go any further. Whenever you're designing a Windows interface like this or any sort of interface, you guys know that there's some tools available to you. Sometimes you might be asked for a wireframe, and a wireframe is a mock-up tool, like kind of a layout of a form. You could use things like Adobe XD, all sorts of different tools for that. Or you might have a storyboard you might be asked for. If you were taking like a class where there were multiple events associated with a given application, a storyboard would show like when somebody clicks this button, we're going to go to this screen, and then if they click this button, we're going to go to this screen. So the storyboard has more wireframes than just the one, and it shows how the different wireframes might be associated with each other. And there's lots of free tools that we can use for that. And then we could also have a prototype where we might have forms and buttons where the buttons kind of connect each other, but there's no actual code behind the scenes. In a prototype, this is something that I think they used to ask for in system analysis and design. I don't know if they still do, but in a prototype where you're kind of simulating how the application is going to work. What I want to point out to you is that most developers that are using Windows Forms applications use the Forms Designer to build all these different pieces, right? Because why would I go to another wireframe tool to mock up what my form is going to look like when I can just put those tools on my form and there's my wireframe, right? So I don't have to necessarily use these other tools. So you'll see that sometimes we can get away from these extra things because we can just build it as we go. So that's an area where in our class, we don't spend a lot of time because we're so concerned about getting this technical content to you because there's a lot of content. So sometimes some of these behind the scenes activities have already occurred and you're just being handed a design. So remember, if you're starting on your own, you want to use these tools to decide how your application is going to look before you get going. And it might just be something that you scratch out. Okay, so we're going to start with the list box. Whenever we work with a list box, it's a list of items or a collection. So it's just another way for us to save an array or a collection. Here, this example shows a little list box that just has one word or thing in it. So our list box gives us the ability to have scroll bars, move up and down, select an item or select multiple items. We have a lot of capabilities with it. We'll be adding our menu strip. Okay. So now I've got this delegate out here that's really mad at me. I can really handle it very easily. Visual Studio now asks me if I would like to go directly to that line of code that's causing me trouble. Yes, I would. And here's my delegate that I need to delete. So I'm going to delete that whole line of code because I deleted label 1 underscore click. I don't want that event procedure. Now I know that was a long way around the block, but I want you to understand why that line of code gets generated and what it means to be deleting it. We're just deleting that lightning bolt connection from that label to its event procedure code. All right, so now let's get back to work. Go back to your Form 1 design, and now it should display it because we fixed our problem with our delegate. So now we can see our form again. And what I want to add is a list box. Now, when I'm working with a list box, I usually have a list of things. Let's expand this out a little bit because we're looking at our audio CD app, and there's quite a few of them. Well, 3 to be exact. Now, our list box control needs to be named. So let's go up to the top and name it LSTBX, and we'll call this list box audio. Now, looking at your list box properties, we do have quite a few properties. I'm going to scroll down and look at them. First of all, the items property says this is a collection. I could actually add items to my list using my form designer if I wanted to. Let's click on it. In your list box properties, find the items property. When you click on items, on the other side, the collection word will have an ellipses, the 3 dots. Click on those, and then you can add these strings to your list box. List box string 1. Let's put Springfield, Missouri, St. Louis. We'll put some cities in here. I'm going to click OK. And now these things are going to be in my list box. That's if I want to add items to my list at form design time. It's very dynamic. I can do that. I can add all of these items to my list at design time. We can add scroll bars. The scroll always visible property is set to false. We could set it to true if we wanted, where we would always see scroll bars. Our selection mode is set to 1 item. Let's run and see what that means. I'm going to run my application, and I should see these items that I put in my list box at design time. Now, my selection mode is set to 1, so that means if I click on 1, it selects that one. So there's no way you can use the Shift key or the Control key to select more than 1 item. Okay, so that selection mode is single. Now I'm going to change my selection mode to, let's do multi-extended. Multi-simple is kind of a weird one. It's not very standard. So I'll do multi-extended instead. Now this is the kind of list that we're used to, where we can select multiple things. So you should be able to use your Shift key to select a range, your Control key to select or deselect certain ones. Now your code is going to have to handle those depending on how you have that set, but you have that option of being able to handle multiple items in your collection. All right, so I'm going to set this back to single. For our needs right now, we just want it to be 1. Now, I also am going to get rid of the items in my collection because I want to use a data source. So I'm going to go back to my collection editor and delete all of these items. So I have an empty list box again. When our application starts, we know we run our program.cs because it has our main method, and our main method says to run this form. Well, I'm going to double click on a blank spot in my form because I want to add a special event procedure that runs before the form displays called the form load. So that event procedure is associated with my form, so I need to double click someplace on my form. Now, this is our code. Let's add a couple comments here. First of all, where we've got public form 1 here, this is our constructor. So when we first open a Windows Forms app, it might look a little foreign, but it's stuff that we've seen. This is our constructor for the form instance. When our program.cs file says to run this form, the form is going to be, an instance is going to be created of the form. That instance will be populated by our constructor. Our constructor runs that initialize component method that we saw earlier in that Windows form generated code. So this will set up our form. We could add code to our constructor if we wanted to, if we wanted something to display before the form was loaded or update something. We can also add code to our form load event. Our form load event runs before the form is displayed. So it's like a start method. It just runs once before our form is displayed. Now in our application, we created this awesome database thing that would generate test data for us. So let's take advantage of it. We said that we could create an array of compilations by running our database generate data method. Remember, if we look at our database, it does the generate data. It's mad at me. Let's see why. We're returning an array of compilations. So that should let us work. Bad array declaration. Oh, where have I got these square brackets in the wrong place or something? What do you think? Why is it giving me such a hard time? Isn't that how you do it? Or do you put the square brackets on the data type? Be good C# programmers there yell and say, hey, that's the wrong place. Messing with you. All right, so my database class generate data method is going to return an array of compilations, my Beatles compilations, right? And then I want to display that in the list box. So in my list box, I actually have this awesome property called Datasource. And I can set my data source equal to an array like this and say, well, just look at that array and everything that's in that array, I want you to show in this list box. So that should work. We should get some data for our Listbox. Let's try running it. So there's my stuff. My toString is kind of messy for this, Yitza. But show us what you got. Let me turn this off. Okay, show us. That looks good. So what's it do? Yeah, share your whole screen with us, not just Visual Studio. Oh, that looks good. Okay, so let's look at your database. Anybody see anything? Can you zoom in a little bit? That looks good to me. What's your, go up to the top. What's your, yeah, that all looks good. Okay, so let's go back to your form. And we've got, oh, that looks great. Set breakpoint there on line 24. Yeah, now let's run. And we want to see it go into your database. Oh, it didn't. So it didn't run your form load. So this is a really good one, Max. So close out of that. So notice how just by setting up that breakpoint, we can see it didn't run as form load method because we should have got that breakpoint. So turn that breakpoint back off. We probably won't need it. And let's go look at your form designer. Oh, the very first one, the form in design mode, the very first tab. Yeah, very first tab up there. You've got it, perfect. Now click on your form, just your form itself, and go to your lightning bolts and your properties. Look at your events. And the form load should be our form load event. So it didn't get associated. There we go. So good job. So notice how sometimes it's just our code isn't running because it's not wired to that event the way it needs to be. So by using the breakpoint and just setting that up in the debugger, we can tell really fast that it didn't execute at all. So it's not a problem with our code. Our code just isn't getting run. So good. Let's fix some things. Anybody else got trouble? Okay, let's see what yours is doing. Okay, so one more line of code. Do one more.
Why was it red? Yeah, you need to.
My database was
Yeah.
not named correctly.
Oh, I got you.
She knows what to do. Anybody else? Bravo. Looks good. Now, I'm not super happy about the way our stuff is displaying. I'm going to run this again and show you what I mean. when we run our toString method, you know, we put all these headings and stuff in there because we would set this thing up for console-based application. So it looks kind of weird now, all squished together. And I think that I want to change it to where it's just data. So I'm going to close out of this form. And I need to go to my compilation class and my toString method. So really easy for us to change and fix this, but we do have to remember where it is. And our toString method is in the class that we're working with, so our compilation class. So for our output info here, I'm going to get rid of the labels. So instead of having the ID plus ID, I'm just going to send the ID, and instead of a new line, a space. And I'm going to do the same thing with all of these, because we've kind of changed our mode here a little bit, and instead of trying to output console information, we're trying to output forms-based information. And we also have the option, you know, we could create a completely different method, like to Listbox or something like that. But it's nice for us to use our toString. And then finally, I don't think I need anything else after the is collector. So now my information should look a little bit better in that list. Let's try it. Now it's just kind of, we should have some formatting, huh? Like some sizes. Let's try that.
Yeah, I'm curious about this. 'Cause I was trying to do that with the homework. I ended up linking it to a class using the toString method. New line wasn't working. You know, I was trying
In
to
a text box?
Yeah, I couldn't get it.
Yeah, and in a text box, if you do a carriage return and a new line, it will work, and I don't know why. Let's find it.
I found you could make the text box a multi-line, and I didn't really.
Yeah, in C# carriage return. So this is a really important one. If you are working with a text box, instead of just \n, you have to do \r\n, and I don't know why a text box is that way. It's just a requirement. The \r is for a carriage return. With an old typewriter, you would return the carriage, so it would go all the way back to the beginning of the line, and then you would push the button to make it go up to a new line. So it was actually two different movements. And for some reason, a text box will only go to a new line if you put both of those in there, \r\n. And I don't remember where that is or how I've encountered it before, but I know it can be a real problem for you. So keep that in consideration. As we go through looking at all of these different fields, I guess we could do the $sign and put our, you'll have to help me format this because I don't remember. Using curly braces. And then can I do like comma 20? Is that what I want to do?
Be minus.
Don't do minus?
Unless you want it to the left. You want that out.
I want it to the left.
Oh, to the
I
left.
want it left aligned. I think since it's a string. And then I should be able to get rid of this output, I would think. Close my string here. Now I just want to try this one because I want to see if that's going to work properly. I'm going to do some testing before I do a whole bunch of coding. Yeah, it looks like that's moved things over a little bit. Might need a little bit more than 20. I'll do 25. Now I want to clean up my artist. So again, I'll do the interpolated string. Put my artist name and comma. We'll give it 25 also. Now for our number of tracks, this is a number. So I'll say like maybe 10 units should be enough to fit that. But again, I might have to do some experimenting. And I'm not going to do the minus sign on the number because whenever we're working with a number, we normally want it to be right aligned. We want strings to be left aligned, numbers to be right aligned. Now our cost, it's been looking pretty ugly, so it'll be good to clean that up. Our cost should be, oh, let's say 20, and then we want it formatted as currency. We should be able to put all of that stuff in there in our interpolated string. Then lastly, our is collector information. That's just going to display true or false. So we'll give it 10 units or so. That should clean up all of our stuff. I'll go ahead and do the ID because I've been typing in a certain size ID, but I might not be that consistent. So I'll say that our ID should be 10. Oh, nice. So now we should have some really nice columns of information. Save that. And of course, now our compilation class is a little bit different in this project than in our earlier ones that we copied it from.
I just bumped the album, the artist to 35, and that kind of lined it up.
The artist to 35.
And the album.
And the album. I think my ID needs to be a little longer too. So this one album is super long. Good test data for us. I'll go to 50. Now my ID, I'm gonna put the minus sign in it also because I think that I'm gonna like the way it's gonna look more. It's left aligned. I'll go 50 and 50 on my name, my album name, and my artist name. Remember, those are just units. They're not like spaces. Still not quite big enough. I've got this great big one. Try 60. And the reason, of course, that we're using units is for things to be more dynamic. Yeah, I'm getting too far now. I'm just going to go back to 25. And that's all right if it looks a little wacky. We don't want to mess with it all day. I wanted to be able to see my other data. Now, the other thing I could do to see my other data, let's go back to our form designer. We're good with all of our formatting. Again, if we were at work and we were getting paid, we could sit there and do some rearranging and come up with the best perfect option, but nobody's paying us, so we'll continue on. So let's go back to our form design. And in our list box, I want to find the scroll bars option. And in my scroll always visible, I'm going to set that to true. Let's see how that works. So it's giving me the up-down scroll bar, but not the side-to-side scroll bar. So is that right to left? I don't think it is. No, that just switched which side the scroll bar was on. So it's on the left side instead of the right side. So that's not what I want. Oh, there it is. Horizontal scroll bar. Yep, I want that. Now I should have just scroll bars in all directions so I can move around.
I'm clicking on my list, the list box.
Uh-huh.
And in the properties, I haven't had any ones that are showing up for you.
Let's see what you're looking at.
Can I zoom in Visual Studios?
Yeah, try your control scroll. I don't know if it only works when you're coding. Not too much. Not so much.
Okay, so I click on my list box here in the middle, and I don't have horizontal control.
Go back to your properties. So you're looking at events. So, go, yeah. Click on your, so, there you go. You got it.
I was on, what's that?
The lightning
bolt.
Yeah, the lightning bolt on this one. So event, and then go back to properties, right inside the lightning bolt property.
Okay.
There you go. So properties, events. Very good, yeah. There's just so many different controls that we have access to. And definitely give us a whirl. So perfect. I have now my scroll bars. My output doesn't look perfect, but that's all right. I could do some things. Now, our list box didn't require hardly any code, did it? That was pretty nice. It was like, well, you have done such a good job here that you don't need any code. So let's put in an event procedure for what would happen when somebody does select an item in our list box. That's the default event for a list box. So you can just select your list box and then double click it to have code generated for you. And your event procedure is going to be selected, index, changed. That just means somebody selected one of the items in your list. Now we want to take that item that's in that list and display it in a message box, just so we can see how this works. When we're looking at our list box, one of the items that we have, or properties that we have access to, we can get the selected index. We could get the selected indices if we had more than one thing selected. We can get the selected item, again, if there's only one. Or we could get the selected items if we'd have allowed people to select more than one thing. Right now, we've only allowed one. So I'm going to see if I can do a message box to show this selected item. So I want to do a message box dot show, and in my show, I want my list box selected item.
It's gonna get angry at you.
What's it mad at me about? Cast to string. So we could do dot to string. Right now, our selected item, it doesn't know what it is. It's like, well, you have this thing in this list box. I don't know what in the world it is. So let's see if it runs our toString method properly, because it's going to have to figure out what that thing is that's in this list box. It's going to have to know that it's a compilation to run our toString method. So let's see if that works. Did you get one pop up before it even opened?
Yeah.
So our selected index changed there because it was being built. So we need an if statement. I'm going to check to see if it works right, though, if I do click on one. Oh, Sgt. Pepper's. Okay, so it does work. And it's using our toString because it's got all of our data. So that looks good. We just need for it to not pop up with that first one in our form load. So let's fix that. In our event, we're going to have an if statement. So in our list box, the selected index will be -1 if there has not been a selection. And there shouldn't be a selection if our form is being loaded. It's just that the selected index got changed when we added that first item to our list box. So I'm going to say only run this message box if somebody has selected one. So let's try that. Oh, I still got that thing. Still got it. We shouldn't have an item selected because we are just now, opening up our application. So that's pretty fun.
I think you're setting it to equal something. Maybe it should be like, the selected index is not greater than or because it's not going to be -1 off the bat.
Well, it should be because we
Right.
haven't selected one. So it shouldn't be setting it to a value whenever we didn't select one.
Yeah.
So let's see what it's saying its value is. Because we didn't select it, so it shouldn't be giving us a selected index value. So I'm going to run this again. Sometimes Visual Studio just changes a little bit between versions. We can get different things. So my selected index is 0, which would be the first one in the list. I can't check for that. So we're going to have to do something different, huh? We're going to have to take control ourselves, aren't we? We need some sort of global variable. We need some sort of class level variable to keep track of whether we're loading our method, our stuff, or whether it's already loaded. So let's go up to our partial class statement. And before our constructor, we're going to add a class level variable. Let's make it a Boolean. And we'll call it what we are loading or something. Let's see, somebody is saying something. Make sure that they haven't figured it all out for us. Yeah, Josh, we can't check for not equal 0 because somebody could click on our first one and then it would be 0 and that would be valid. So you're absolutely right, but I'm afraid we would be in trouble with that. So let's say is loading, and we'll start with that equal to false. And in our form load, let's set our is loading variable to true. And then at the end of our form load, let's set it to false. And then in our list box, instead of using our selected index, let's say if not is loading. Because we only want it to print things for us after we're done loading things. Does that work? It looked. Oh, no, we didn't get weirdo stuff. Yay. So now let's see. I should be able to get my Bob Seger album, but then I should still be able to get this white album, which is selected index 0. We want to make sure they all still work. Looks like everything's working. So we had to go to our own code and our own logic to keep track of that information so that we could control when that message box was popping up. In the videos and stuff that you watch, you will see checking for that selected index to be -1. So you might have to do a little bit of changes. So it's always fun whenever there's release updates that cause us trouble. Perfect. Is everybody's working okay? That's a good one. Go back to our list for today. Okay, so a couple of things we can do. In our application, whenever they click on an item, instead of displaying that message box, what if we had text boxes and we displayed all of the information over here on the side for that one entry? We should be able to do that. We also had that form from our earlier application where we already had all of that information. So there's some code that we could use, but let's go ahead. It'll just take us a second. I'm going to use a label control, and I'm just going to put a couple of our fields out here. My first label, I'm going to say this is the ID. I'll do another label and say this is the album. One more. And I'll say this is the artist. Now I'm just going to do, like I say, a little bit of information. So I'm going to grab a text box and put it beside my ID, and I'll name this text box ID. And then another text box for the album, and I'll name it text box album. And one more for our artist. And this one will be text box artist. Now rearrange a little bit. We're just doing it very quickly. So now when somebody clicks on an item in our list, let's display the information about that item in these text boxes. So I want to go back to my code. And it's our selected index changed method that we want to work with here. Again, we'll keep our isLoading switch because that's been super helpful to us. So now I need something that knows it's a compilation. So let's say we'll name this compilation temp. And instead of saying this is a new compilation or anything, we're going to say this is our Listbox selected item. Now, if I look at the errors that are displayed when I mouse over this, if I go down to the very bottom, because I always try to look at the end of the error messages first, it says cannot implicitly convert type object to a compilation. So I need to put a cast there to say, hey, this selected item is actually an instance of a compilation. It's going to let me do that. Still mad at me. It's like, I just don't know what you want. So let's think about this. How do it?
Mine's also not angry.
Yours is happy?
The only difference is I didn't put it in.
Embedded statement cannot be a declaration or labeled statement.
Yours is happy though? Whose is happy? Let's see it. Yours is happy? Let's see it. Show me, sir. Yay. We'll see if it's okay. Mine's mad at me.
That's what I've got.
Yours is happy as can be.
Pretty much the exact same as you typed.
Because it's in an if statement, inside the if statement.
Yeah?
Oh. The
Whenever
two
we
lines?
first made it,
Yeah.
It's what?
whenever we first made the if statement, we didn't put the message box inside of it.
Oh, all it's complaining at me about? Good job, you guys. It's much complainier than it used to be. I thought it was upset with that statement. I was like, really, you're a compilation. It's okay. I promise. All right. Good job. So I can get rid of this message box.show because I really don't need it. And it was causing me trouble too. Okay, now I can use my temporary compilation to load up my text boxes. That's what I wanted to do in the first place. So my text box ID text property.
You're not showing your screen.
Do what?
You aren't showing your screen.
Oh, thank you, sir. Let me fix that. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I've got my temporary compilation, and I want to use its ID to load up that text box. My next text box then, that is my album, I want to set its text property equal to our temp compilations album property. And finally, our artist, we'll set it to our artist. So we would continue on with that for all of our other data fields. to display everything. Now let's see if it'll work. Our first one. You know, now that we changed it, we would almost be okay letting it display that first one, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So we could actually get rid of our is loading if statement that was making it mad at me. We could keep that switch if we wanted to in our form load in case we ran into something else like that. Or we could get rid of it. But sometimes as we evolve our project, notice that was just our testing, just because I wanted to do that message box that caused that trouble.
That reminds me of like an alert, like in HTML stuff. We want to see something, like a console log or an alert. Sometimes we do stuff like that.
Makes
Make
it
sure something's running.
Yeah, just to try it. Same type thing. So now it's displaying that first one. That looks good. I can select my different item and have it display there. Yay. Okay, is everybody's working okay? Okay. Now, when you're working with your list boxes, we could control all this a lot more manually. We could go through some sort of loop and look at every entry in our array and manually add each of those entries to our list box. So there's lots of different ways that you will see other people handling these things. Let's create a menu. If everything is working here for this one, let's go back to design mode. And in design mode, I want to find a new tool that we haven't used before. And of course, you know there's lots of them. But I want the menu. And if you look up there in your toolbox, you'll see it's called the menu strip. So